First world, come in and take a seat. Pay us no attention, it's all conspiracy. We have satire and parody, some funny, some perverse. If none of it's offensive to you, you'd be the first.
The Immortal Mask, a 1970s superhero crime noir adventure that follows a retired soldier who is given a covenant interview with a death row inmate. What he learns from the interview thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to utilize his military training to survive from being hunted for the information that could topple the most powerful ruling class in the city. This is not a pre-order or a crowdfunding campaign. Get your books now at Denali's.com.
Hey friends, Morgan Quaid here to tell you about a little project called The Crimson Folly, a D&D inspired comic anthology which takes place in a fantasy tavern called, you guessed it, The Crimson Folly. I'm working with more than a dozen artists from all over the world to bring this story to life through sequential comic artwork, intricate portrait pieces, sketches, and of course, words. My aim is to produce a combined comic story and art book. The first 40 pages will be a comic book telling the main story of the folly and using different artists to build out each section of the story. The art book will then contain sketches and short stories relating to characters from that story. So if you're a fan of D&D, fantasy artwork, comics, or just great storytelling, you'll love The Crimson Folly. Yes, you will.
Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some.
Twenty-five seconds to curtain, folks.
Your favorite podcast is Critical Blast.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Distribution. I know it's logistics, but I sometimes say distribution. And of course, I will help you with your crowdfunding data through Critical Blast Consulting. Sometimes we get a late start because the guest doesn't show up on time. And sometimes we get a late start because we have a guest like David Taylor II, who every time I talk with him, we're like talking about things we love and watching how they went different directions than we wanted them to. And the next thing you know, it's like 5 after 7. And I'm like, we got to do this on the air instead of in the back room. So everybody, please welcome with me to the show, David Taylor II.
What's up, RJ? It's great to see you, man.
It's glad to have you. I'm glad to have you back on the show again, man. I mean, it's the last time we talked, I think it was the Stargirl. Was it Stargirl debuting or was it back in Crisis?
I think it was Stargirl, but it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah,
it's been a long time. Yeah.
But for those wondering why we're talking about this, David used to have the fastest podcast chat on the internet with the Flash Chat when season 1, season 2, when it was good, and would be an hour just talking about what went down that episode. Let me ask you, because you didn't do that for Arrow. What made you said, yeah, this is what I want to do, and how many episodes did it take before you did it?
I didn't do it for Arrow because I was still getting into my written reviews, so I hadn't thought to do a live thing. With the Flash, I love the show so much. I connected with hundreds of people on Twitter over our mutual love for the show. And it was the thing where as soon as the show aired, we all wanted to talk about it. So people really loved my reviews on my website. But then I said, well, why don't I take this live so we can really get into the media issues and I can get that real-time feedback. And that's how I met a great portion of my followers. And the only reason I stopped doing flash chat is because the questions started to become redundant because the show kept recycling literally the exact same plot. We
Yeah,
get
it was
5
always the
minutes,
fast person.
right? We get 5 minutes of Barry in the beginning. He causes the problem through some type of inept choice. He says, "I'm not fast enough. I can't do it." There's a bunch of side character shenanigans in the middle. He gets a pep talk. He cries, and then he goes to fix it. And 50% of the time, somebody else actually fixes it for him. He still couldn't
Yes.
do it. So, the show hit a point where after season 3 or 4 to where that's all it was doing. And I couldn't sustain a chat where the lead character is the most stagnant character on the show. And I just found myself just losing the ability to come up with fresh questions. I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah, for 3 seasons, it always opened with, "My name is Barry Allen, and I am the fastest man alive." And I'm like, no, for 3 seasons, there was always somebody faster than you, whether it was Thawne or whether it was Zoom or whether it was who was the third one was another Savitar, was it?
Well, their version of Savitar. That wasn't the real
Yeah.
Savitar as we know. Because had they done that, that had a chance to be a real storyline, but they didn't do that. And then they give us Godspeed. And I'm like, there aren't,
that was
10 people outside of the comics that even know who Godspeed is.
Yeah.
So,
There was no point to that.
right.
I had real hopes for a show bounce back when they finally had the big bad being the Thinker. And when you
Yes.
got like halfway
Yes.
into that season, I'm like, oh, this is all real good. And then it just kind of petered out.
Well, it seemed more like they didn't have an ending, a payoff that was worthy of the setup. And
Yeah,
that's
they
a
did.
very common writing trap you can fall into. And so the key to fixing that is you always have to reverse engineer from your conclusion. You don't write and write and write and then say, how do we end? You start at the end. You say, how do we want the characters to end up when this is over? And then you write backwards. So I don't think they did that because it was such a great setup. It was someone using the power of their mind. It was real stakes. It was something that even the fastest man alive would need help with. It was all the elements were there.
Yeah.
The kind of flash story that you want. And the payoff was just kind of head scratching.
Yeah, it was because the way they wrote the Thinker, he really did have every angle 10 steps ahead on everything.
Mhm.
I mean, when you hit that moment where he tells Barry, he's like, well, how, basically, why aren't you here in your red suit? And letting you know, oh, he's figured it all out. You're like, oh, this is some heavy stuff. And, because it was like, now he knows his secret identity, but everybody knew it anyway. He's always taken the mask off. And what villain out there doesn't have it? I mean, I watched, God help me, I'm still watching the 9th season, and they recruited some villains to help them take down some other villains. Oh yeah, ninth season. It's another speedster that got the Red Death.
Yes, I was aware of that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, do you know who the Red Death is in this one? Because it's
Batwoman.
Yeah, it's Batwoman.
Yeah,
from another Earth.
Yeah, they're trying to. I don't know what they're trying to do with her. They're still trying to make her work. I mean, maybe she's like the Captain Marvel of the DCCW. Like they keep saying she's the best character ever, but they can't find a way to make her work.
Well, if she's the best character ever, then what was Kate? Because I thought Kate was supposed to be the best character ever.
Right, that's right. And then also with the Thinker conclusion, his wife pulled a Wanda Maximoff. She kind of walked away and went back to her research after, almost destroying everything. She's like, well, okay, guess that wasn't really right. So guess I go back to being a legit scientist. And I'm like, really? Because there weren't any repercussions. And I was like, I don't know.
Well, there was a lot that we just accepted, like that whole pipeline thing. How many prisoners could you keep in the pipeline? And feed them and clean them and do everything else with them in a space pretty much the size of my broadcasting booth here.
Well, I keep telling people all the time, your brain does not miss anything. It's just that you can't keep everything you know in your conscious mind because you go crazy.
Yeah.
But your brain actually does not miss anything because you can be in the kitchen and smell a smell and it takes you back to your grandmother's kitchen in childhood. You can be walking down the street and hear a song and it takes you back to the prom, whatever. Your brain doesn't miss anything. And so if you don't respect the intelligence of humans, you'll do things that create such mental dissonance on the screen. If enough of that piles up, people are just going to stop watching because they can't take it. So you can't tell me from the core that a cop like Joe West doesn't understand that you can't incarcerate super criminals on your own. Now, eventually, they did get that over to, it wasn't Star Labs, it was that other thing that his wife was a part of. But all before they got the pipeline excise, I'm like, Joe, like you realize that, you know, you can't sit on this kind of cruel and unusual punishment and then to have people in a cell where they barely have room to turn in a circle.
Yeah.
You know, how do you eat? How do you go to the bathroom? But that would drive you crazy very, very quickly. And then what about the oxygen? And then what about to have power dampening cells? You have to have power to the facility, which would put a strain on the grid in Central City. I mean, there's just all kind of practical stuff. And I'm like, you guys are scientists and cops. And you're like, la, 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 we don't see it. Really?
Yep.
Really?
All they had to do was just, you know, disconnect that tube and haul it off to Iron Heights and say, okay, plug this in and keep them in this thing.
That's
You'll
right.
be fine.
That's right. And we only saw a very few of them actually get a trial. You're supposed to have a trial.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to try metahumans, then you need to write laws that can. I mean, it was just, see, I tell people all the time, when you get to that level, you need to turn it into like a cartoon. If you actually turn it into a cartoon, with a cartoon, things can just happen and you don't need an explanation. And so when you get to that kind of cartoony level, the only way you can watch it is if you think of it that way.
Yeah.
Because
well, that's where it got.
Right.
That's where it got to season 9.
Right.
Yeah, because the real Batwoman shows up and, you know, the craziness is all wrapped up because she can just kick the Red Death's ass and does so quickly. And then she's like, is it always this crazy in Central City? And I swear, all three of the Pied Piper, Goldface, and I can't even remember the other one, but it wasn't Heatwave, but he's got the firepower thing. They just all kind of looked at each other and had a little grin on their faces. And simultaneously, it's a Wednesday. Because remember they used that line before because the show used to come out on Wednesdays. And they'd said, you know, like, God, it's another Wednesday. Everything's crazy.
Yeah, but your show is in trouble when your show has become an SNL skit of itself.
Yeah, I know.
Because that's what The Flash is. It's seriously an SNL, it's seriously satire and parody of itself. So hard to take it seriously now.
I miss Flash Chat. I mean, because I would be at work and I'd be like, oh, I'm taking lunch early because it's Thursday and we're gonna go over Flash Chat. But we do have an active chat out here, waiting to hear more from you. They didn't come here for Flash and Arrowverse stuff, but you deal with it, guys. It's what we talk about a lot. Woody's out here referring to.
Let me throw out that I am thinking of doing a final Flash Chat if my followers would want that. Is, you know, I couldn't get past the first 2 episodes of the season, but, you know, just to wrap up, because it has been such a major part of our geek lives. And those first 2 seasons, we were heavily invested. So I am thinking about doing that. So if people want to see it, I might make that happen.
As a reviewer, this is back when the CW did this. They sent out digital assets on CD, DVDs. I had the pilot for episode 1 not sweetened, so like some special effects weren't there. And it was like months before the show was coming out. And I took it to a convention and we had a showing in a room, and it was just like all the stuff that was in there, the busted cage with the Grodd label on the door. I was like, oh my God, that's coming.
Well, one of my favorite literary devices, and I know we're going to get onto my thing, but one of my favorite literary devices is the snake in the garden. Kavanaugh so nailed the idea of being thorn in their midst in the guise of Wells and being a speedster, yet pretending to be wheelchair bound. And as we got to see that unfold, that was some of the best writing and acting I'd ever seen, because he had what I call controlled menace. You could feel his menace and his hatred of Barry, but somehow he controlled it and pretended to be an ally. I mean, it was brilliant.
Because he still had to get Barry trained in order for some reason, something to do with his existence couldn't happen unless Barry became the best Flash he could be.
Well, Barry had to get to a certain point in his mastery of the Speed Force for it to echo forward through time, for Thawne to pick it up in the 25th century, then reverse engineer it, and then generate enough energy to get back home.
And as much as I loved Kavanaugh, from a story perspective, once it was revealed, there was no point in having Kavanaugh be the Reverse Flash from that point forward, because that was a mask he was wearing. He actually had that other, and I can't remember the other actor's name.
It was Matt, I forgot his last name.
But you know, he took Wells' identity so that he could infiltrate the world. And you know, you start seeing him in other episodes, like, why are you still Tom Cavanaugh? That's not right.
Well, it was a Terminator style of time travel. It was elliptical, meaning that the past caused the future that you came from. So you have to come back from the future that you came from to create the past that caused the future. So it's an elliptical time travel model.
It made my head hurt. But, I figured they just did it because Tom Cavanaugh ate up scenery when he was in the show. And the writers knew it, and they ruined it by taking advantage of it, by bringing in every possible Wells they could. And when they hit that Council of Wells, I'm like, oh, this is the roast. Yeah, this is Challenge of the Super Friends now. Roasting level. Woody's in the chat, wants to talk about Lucifer, the Light Bearer, and you're missing that. He's giving us Latin at Lux Perpetua, Luceat Eas, or something. I just say Fiat Lux, and you know, that's enough. Mike Walter's out here in the chat. Yeah.
One of the things I do in my book series is I use different languages, and Gabriel, one of the four archangels that's at the center of the action, is a master of so many languages. He slips into different dialects when he talks. So even if he starts out talking in English, he will utter words in a variety of languages. And one of the turning points is when you see how Lucifer can speechify, when you see how he has the ability to captivate his listeners by the things he says, but the way he says them. Because what always tickled my brain was, first of all, how do you become a disgruntled angel? If you're in the heavenly realm and you're in the place where the glory of God lives, and you're a part of that scene, how can someone talk you into a whole rebellious coup?
Yes, especially if you don't have free will. So,
but I believe angels do have free will.
They have to.
Yeah. And so that was one of the many things that fascinated me about the idea, because I'm like, how could you convince? And so my answer to that in my story world is that Lucifer spoke to angels that were disgruntled. It's very much a situation where if you have workers at a certain level and they don't understand, or they won't accept that it's their job to do their job, and somebody comes along and says, what if we had new management? What if we change things to where you could get the recognition that you deserve? What if it wasn't all about Michael and Gabriel and Uriel, because they get all the attention? What if you could be at the forefront and get that kind of thing? And that was so real to me. That was so believable to me. That was so organic to me. that's kind of what I used as the basis for at least how we could talk them into it. So yes, so that's my first novel. That novel went #1 in 3 countries. I'm still extremely proud of it. And it has so many things. Now, it started out as this idea. I imagine a scenario for the first time the devil saw himself after he fell, because I wondered, what would that be like? Because the name Lucifer means, as we said before, light bearer. So what would you do if one day you're the coolest of the cool kids? You're so cool till everybody watches you lead worship. You're so cool until you have your own groupies. You're so cool until people hang off the words you say, but it starts to get to your head. And so you start feeling like you need to take over or whatever. And then after all that happens, you're on earth and you look into a body of water. So yesterday, you were this brilliant, illuminated, educated, charismatic, impactful, what we would call an influencer in the heavenly realm. And then you look over in the pond, and now you're this twisted, ugly, gnarly, horned, fanged mess of what you were yesterday. That's the first image I saw. I'm like, huh. Then I just sat down and started writing out ideas, and then it became a short story, and then it became a longer short story, and then it became a novel. That's what spun everything off.
I say we should have caught you when it was a short story, but then you wouldn't have had the novel. But because we've done we've done several books now, but we published 2 anthologies, The Devil You Know and The Devil You Know Better, which were all short stories about people meeting the devil, and they were horror and comedy and science fiction, just whatever you want to write, as long as this theme was met.
Yeah.
So you got this as book 1, and I don't know how many books you've got in mind for this, whether you're going to go full J.K. Rowling and have like a 7-book series, or if it's just a trilogy. But you talked earlier about writing from the end backward.
Yes.
Do you have, if you're doing multiple books, do you think from the end of your last book and pull forward, or do you think from the end of your first book and say, I'll worry about the next book when that adventure comes along?
No, I've got the whole story mapped out.
There you go.
So I look at the end, how I want things to end up, and then write backwards from there. What might change in the process is, because what I did was I actually wanted to create an entire story world and not just a series of books. So actually what I have is novels, short stories, coloring books. I have an RPG where you can play as characters from the novel. And then I have the novel series. So and then also have comic books. So I actually created, because I always wanted to create a story world across multiple mediums. So what I did was every media platform in the story world is a significant part of the story, but it tells its own section of the story. So like if you want to get the whole experience, then you need the coloring books, you need to play the game, you need to read the comic books, because it all ties together. But the novels are the main or the core story, if you will, but significant things happen in every part of the story.
So do these other media, do they exist yet, or is this still part of the plan?
Oh no, it exists yet. You can get it right now.
What? Send me some links, man. I've got a link to a book here. I thought we were talking about book 1, but no, there's a campaign going on here.
All right, hold on. I will send you this link. But yeah, so yeah, I always wanted to do that. I always saw it as that, and so that's one of the reasons it kind of took me longer to hold on. I got to find this on my website. That's one of the reasons it took me longer to get everything out like I wanted to, because I kind of went wide before I went deep. I had everything in mind, but I wanted to be sure to get these other mediums going, because you can experience it from so many different angles. And also the way I write, nothing is wasted. Absolutely nothing is wasted. So the novels tie in to the comics, the coloring books tie in to the novels. I mean, it's all connected. It's all connected. That's the thing. Okay. All right. Hold on. Okay. Here we go.
So did you crowdfund any of this stuff? Because that's how the cool kids do it now.
Did I?
Or did you crowdfund any of these things, or did you just make them?
I crowdfunded. There, I sent you the link. It's Secrets of the Realm. I knew I was forgetting something. It's secretsoftherealm.com, but I sent you the link so you can put that on the screen and we can look at all the stuff.
Yeah.
The answer to your question is I crowdfunded the comic book. Yeah, there it is. So up at the top is a sign up for my newsletter, and then the Facebook page, and then my Twitter, and then scroll down.
Link out in the chat for people.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So Secrets of the Realm. That's the overarching
that's the Facebook page. But
okay.
yeah, that's the name of the whole story world. And
so, well, look at this. There's the book we were bringing up.
Right.
No, that's not the book we were bringing up. This is the. Wait a second.
The book we were just talking about is the one on the left. That's the first novel. And this one is the first interlude. That's the follow-up. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Too Many Wins.
Okay. Because I'm looking at Amazon, and the cover says okay, never mind. I don't know how I got that cover, because I thought I looked up the first one, but I guess it's all together on the Amazon page. Book one and the interlude. So never mind. Just tell me what we're looking at, and I'll follow you.
Okay. So the first one, all the way on the far left, is the first novel that started all. That's the one that went #1 in 3 countries. And that's where we first established the characters in the story world. And so many things happen in there. And I don't want to give away any spoilers. But in every book, you're going to have moments that make you say, what just happened? You're not going to believe it. And so the one on the right is the new one that's on pre-order right now. That's the immediate aftermath of the end of the first novel. And so, again, I don't want to give away spoilers if you haven't read it, but that's why I'm giving people time to read that first one before the second one drops, because it feeds right into what happens next. Then we have 3 coloring books: Animals of the Realm, Secret Beasts of the Realm Part 1, and Secret Beasts of the Realm Part 2. Everything in those coloring books is featured in the novels at some point. So when you're coloring those strange animals, and when you're looking things that look like different kinds of things, they show up in the books, and there's a reason. There's an in-story reason for those types of animals being there. So again, I'm not going to spoil that, but it's all connected. So when you color them, as you discover them as the novel series go on, they start to make more sense to you. So there's that. Scroll down. Then I have my tabletop RPG. That one on the left is the beta version. That's free. So that's where you can download and print your own rulebook and print your own cards. And the artwork there is a sample of the art that we use in the next version, which that one you have to special order. So you just have to email me. Yeah, that's the free one. So you can print that, download, and play it. And I love the game. I might do another edition where I add on some more tweaks, because as you get feedback, you want to make stuff better. But the idea behind the RPG is, in a nutshell, you have to choose a side. This shouldn't be giving away too much, but one of the key elements in the story is that the angels didn't believe death was real. They thought death was a myth. So Lucifer became a worshiper of death. When the other brethren discover that they can actually die, they completely freak out.
Well, yeah.
So I want you to imagine if you learn something that upends your entire world, everything you've believed since you can remember being alive, you find out there was way more to the story. And I've even got some more, thank you, Woody. I've even got some more stuff coming up that feeds into that. But so if you discover something that upends your world, the RPG is about making your choices. So how the RPG works is you have assignments, and so the games master sends you on assignments, but as you go, you have a choice of light side powers or dark side powers. And you get to choose how much of either you use to do what you're trying to do. So dark side powers are shortcuts, like they can maybe get the job done faster, but they cost you some character. You have to compromise some integrity to use them. If you stick with light side powers, it might take longer and it might be a longer way around, but you'll still be you when you get through. And what does time mean in the eternal realm anyway? That's why dark side powers are so insidious, because you don't have to shortcut. You do it because you want to.
Right.
And so at the end of each game, no matter how you set it up with the games master in charge, you end up as the sum total of your choices. And then all kind of fun things happen at that point too. So that's the idea behind the game.
So when you built your world, and I mean, this, I say it's your world, it is your world, but it's a familiar place to anybody familiar with either biblical history or Judeo-theology, mythical, whatever you want to call it, depending on your viewpoint. But do you go more with an Isaiah War in Heaven version, or do you go more Dante, or do you kind of take the parts you want from each? How did you build your version of what happened?
That's a really great question. I started with the King James Bible, but I studied multiple religions for their perspective, their ideologies, their imageries. So I studied Hindu. I studied a lot of Jewish literature because, as you know, Christianity comes out of Judaism. I studied many different faiths to try to understand their philosophy on the tension of good versus evil and what that means in terms of our choices. And so everything that I did, I based it on a Bible verse, but the Bible itself alludes to certain events, but it almost never spells them out when it comes to this. So I use my research and Bible verses and my imagination. And so I filled it in. For example, seraphim, I love seraphim the way they're described in the Bible. In my series, their wings are made out of fire and they have one yellow eye and one orange eye. And they're always going somewhere, so they're kind of impatient. Gabriel is the messenger. And because Gabriel, when he told Zacharias and Elizabeth they were going to have John the Baptist, Zacharias didn't believe him, and Gabriel struck him mute. He's like, Gabriel, I'm Gabriel that's standing in the presence of God, and you're going to be able to say nothing until that boy's born now.
Yeah, so don't mess with me now.
Right. So I crafted Gabriel to be kind of impatient, kind of preoccupied, because he has so many languages and he has so many messages, and he's never not busy. That kind of thing. So I took kind of clues we get in scripture and worldviews from other places and kind of extrapolated into personalities, into scenarios. Uriel is the great negotiator. So he's the archangel that, he's not a pacifist by any means, but he's the archangel that would rather talk and communicate and hear what every side has to say. Plus, he has a huge secret. And I'm not going to spoil it, but Uriel has this huge secret. And so when you find out what it is, you're going to be like, what just happened? So, and then, so there's Michael, there's Gabriel, and Michael is the chief gladiator, and he is just, he's so strong until the other angels kind of get afraid of him when they see him do stuff kind of on the casual, like lifting an asteroid, and they're just standing there like, holy cow. And so Michael is
Gabriel's the one with the trumpet. Moroni's the one who shot Robin's parents.
Right, right. Well, they all have trumpets too. And Raphael is the healer. He's the keeper of the leaves of the tree. And that's why the angels don't know what death is, because any injury they've ever sustained, they can get healed from.
That would be the tree of life.
Huh?
That would be the tree of life?
Yes. Once, however, you introduce death, and their whole worldview is forced to change because of everything that Lucifer does. And so this interlude book is about the first wave of that reaction. And as the book series goes on, those reactions get deeper and both more blatant and more nuanced, because what do you do when you've been friends with somebody for 1,000 years and they turn out to be the biggest turncoat you've ever seen, and they leave a trail of destruction in their wake? And then you have to wonder, how does that ultimately play out? And so another thing that was a driving force for me is, and I'm just going to be as frank as possible, we have, when I say we, I mean us humans, we have enough in life already that divides us.
Yeah.
So I thought, what are some of the things that unite us as humanity? One of the biggest issues that unite us as humanity is suffering. It doesn't matter what your faith, it doesn't matter your age or your ethnicity, your primary language, your culture, it doesn't matter. You have stood over the body of something dead and said, why? A dead marriage, a dead dog. God help you if it was a dead child, if you've already buried your parents, if you were in a car accident and one of your friends didn't survive, if you heard about it at school, if you had a school shooter, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If you are a human, at some point in your existence, you have stood over something that you love. You have witnessed a senseless death and said, why? You asked life why, you asked God why, you asked your parents why? Why? And so I realized that that is one of the things that binds us all. So I said, well, we need to get some solid answers to the question as to why is there so much evil in the world? Why do these things happen? And so by the time my series is over, I'm going to address those. So it's a fictional world based on real events, based on faith, that wrestles with practical issues. So I'm merging a bunch of different layers in there, but that's where I'm going with it before it's all over.
I have an antique copy of Milton's Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. The kind where it's like, leather bound, imprinted on the front, edges are gilded with a gold, whatever. And I read it one time because I wasn't made to. I was like, what? I hear about this. Let's read this thing. And it's, it's the one where you get that quote, is tis better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taken with the battle, because you know that this battle happens pre-creation or at the point of creation, with time distension and everything else that's celestial, and the fight. I'm thinking, okay, well, when they fought, it was like swords of fire and they're clashing. No, they brought out guns and cannons and rail guns and bombs. I'm like, Milton was thinking ahead. He's just like, why wouldn't they know all of the weapons that would be available throughout time? They exist outside of it. Sure, they'd use them. So it just painted a real unique picture of the war to me.
I've got a story. I've got a story about that too.
You have it all planned out. How many books is this? You haven't said.
The novel series will probably end up being 4 books. Originally, it was going to be 3. When I wrote the 3rd book, it was so long I had to split it into 2. So it was originally like Infinity War and Endgame. So I had to split it into 2 to really get in everything I want to say. Because
so it'll all end up being 6 movies by the time it's done. Because hey, why not? It's got to go there, right?
Well, I try to go as deep as possible, and I try to make it organic. And when you follow the through line of the thought, it'll make sense to you once you get to the end.
Mike Walters reminding us that at the top of the hour here, when we're done, do pop over to the mic stand where he goes over the niche news of the day, everything in comics, manga, and professional wrestling. And of course, on Fridays, Mike goes back to the golden age for the comic book historical retrospective. Picks, he's going through them chronologically. He is now in 1939 somewhere, and we'll be picking up one of those books, and he and the panel will be reading the book out loud, online, on screen, just providing a great look back at where this medium came from that we all love so much. And I know it's not traditional Lucifer, but I was a fan of that show. For what it was. I know they said it was based on the Neil Gaiman thing. I'm like, no, you just basically borrowed Mazikeen. That's the only thing that made it the DC universe Lucifer. Therefore, you were able to use the trademark. Without Mazikeen, you've just got Lucifer, and that's public domain.
Right.
But when they did the Crisis, and John Constantine went to Earth 666, and Tom Willis stepped out that door, I swear unashamedly, I squealed like a 14-year-old girl that he was part of Crisis.
Oh. Yeah, no,
like,
I understand.
I don't know how they kept that secret that long.
We fanboy and we can't help it. I understand.
I know, but it was like you had thought that all the leaks, everything that was going to be in Crisis had been leaked out, all the guest appearances, but they held that one close to the vest, and it worked for me.
Absolutely.
Although they didn't explain, or we just accepted it that the devil, Lucifer on Earth 666, is the devil of all the Earths. He never really covered a multiverse aspect of that.
Well, I have my own theory on that in terms of dimensions, because I see the heavenly realm as something that can unfold in infinite ways. So time and space is only relative to those that are in it. But if you don't live in it, then everything would look like one thing to you, even if it's multifolded.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the approach that I take. Because
when we're talking about
multiverses in any medium, we're always talking about how they would look to us.
True.
Okay, so when I think of it, I think, well, what would it look like from a divine point of view if every dimension, because, one of the biggest tenets that we have, especially in superhero niches, is which type of reality theory do we subscribe to? Do we believe that there are multiple Earths where history unfolds in different ways? Or do we believe that there are Earth vibrating at different speeds where every choice that can be made has been made? And so we tend to tell stories from one of those perspectives. So we either change our vibrational frequency, and in this universe, the Waynes decided not to walk home from the theater that night. So events unfolded differently. And then in Flashpoint, where one point in time is changed, then Bruce dies and not his parents.
Right.
So Thomas becomes Batman and Martha becomes Joker, which I love that, by the way. And then, but everything that we do is always from our point of view. But I tried to go above and say, well, what would it look like if all of the multi-folds, even if they're infinite, could be seen all at once? Because that's something only God can do. But I'm like, if the angels grew up like that, would they even think that way? because that's what we think. See what I mean?
Yeah. But what I'm thinking, and by the way, you need to pick up Flashpoint Beyond if you haven't, because it takes that Thomas Martha thing. Jeff Johns takes it over and kicks off a new Justice Society and Stargirl and the Lost Children, and it's a lot of fun in the DC Comics right now in that one little corner. But
Awesome.
But if all the choices that can be made are different, what if person A or person prime in universe A makes choices that are selfish and basically sinful and rejected, and person 2 says, no, I think there's a better way, and walks a path of righteousness? Which one goes to hell?
Well, that is pure theology.
Yeah.
And as a Christian in my Christian faith, even though people have strong myths about what the Bible actually says, the truth of the matter is that righteousness is not by works. There's actually nothing that we could do to stand before a holy God and self-justify. But in my opinion, the reason that people hold on to that so strongly is because we want to. We want to say, I'm good enough for eternal life because I do this, or I don't do that. But Christianity actually states explicitly that nobody's righteous, that good works don't pay for sin. What pays for sin is shed blood. Something has to bleed and something has to die. And God taught Adam and Eve that in the garden when he killed the first animal to cover them with skins. They covered themselves with leaves, and God said that wasn't going to do it. So some had to bleed and some had to die. So that is the common thread in the Bible, that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. And so
but humans don't like to accept gifts. We want to do it on our own. And that's why I always said, like, religion is a set of rules that men create to build this ladder to God. And there's just not enough rungs. Whereas salvation is God reaching down to man because only he can. But it's a gift, and nobody wants to take it because, no, I can do this on my own. I don't need your help. I don't need charity. That's how humans think. We don't want to admit, okay, we can't do this. I really need your help, and I will be indebted to you because we hate feeling indebted to anybody.
Well, the answer has been right in front of us all along. If you look at the Genesis week, because when God made the world and then put Adam in the garden, he said, that'll be $99.95. No, he didn't.
$8.
He didn't charge him. And then when he made Eve, when he pulled Eve out of Adam and brought her to the man and married her to the top man on the earth, there's nobody to trade up to. He said, $99.95. No, he didn't. He just gave it to him. The problem that people have is just because you don't see the kind of goodness down here doesn't mean it's not up there. People always measure God by human standards.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be that good. You wouldn't love like that. So that's why you don't think it's possible. But God never charged us for dominion over this planet. He never charged Adam for a perfect, beautiful wife. He never charged Eve for being married to the top man on earth. He just gave it to him. And that kind of goodness freaks people out because it's not human. It's divine. It's not supposed to be human. And
we certainly never get that kind of deep theology with a committed decision in comic books. And I wrote an entire article on this for my website back in the day because it just struck me so hard. When remember we had Blackest Night?
Yes.
And then there was Brightest Day, and it's like, 12 people will be coming back to life. And I was like, okay, well, it was 6 villains and it was 6 heroes. And the villains immediately do villain things. And I'm like, we know that God exists in the DC universe because he's talked to Superman when Superman teamed up with the Spectre. We've had Zoriel in the Justice League. We know hell exists. Neron has popped up. We've seen, Etrigan the demon. Swamp Thing has walked there. Lucifer is a character. So these places exist, and the theology behind them has its rules. But these villains come back to life, and the first thing they don't do is drop to their knees and say, "Thank you, God. Please don't send me back where I was. What can I do to never go back there again?"
Right.
And the heroes are like, and we're just assuming, did good, did bad, went to hell. The heroes are like, what happened? We were in paradise. We're back here again. Crap. What did we do wrong?
Those concepts fascinate me as well in terms of the concept of an afterlife, because one of the things I struggled with in writing my series was, how can I put it, what are the substance of spiritual bodies? That amazes me, because they're not the same as clay bodies, but they are bodies. And so I try to come up with some type of approximation, because that's always been a fascination of mine. What you would have to be made out of to exist in a celestial space, and what you have to be corporeal. And then we know some creatures are both. And so I came up with an elaborate birth process for angels in what I call creation cocoons, where they're actually put together a piece at a time. And when Lucifer was created, which is where the first book starts, he's getting a sense of the things that are being built to him, but he's in a half sleep, half dream state. And so, because again, that idea just amazes me, the types of, again, bodies and the way your body would have to function if there's no aging or death, the way our bodies functioned before we got introduced to aging and death, what would have happened if there was.
After the time of Noah, when suddenly the years started collapsing.
Yeah, right. So with the first family, the Bible says that Adam lived upwards of 900 years. Yeah. And then when we get to the floodwaters of Noah, God cut that down to 120. So we got close to, just a little bit over a tenth of the years we used to have. But then also I was thinking about spirits that don't have bodies when you study demonology, when you study possession, when you study the idea of something unclean attaching itself to a human, like and trying to manifest. That's something that's existing in both planes at the same time. So, the logistics of the whole thing just fascinate me to no end. So when I'm writing my series, I try to come up with things that I think make sense in the context of the world I've created. But it's another one.
The fun thing about the fun thing, they're angels, they're fun. The cool thing about angels is that each one has a very specific function, and it's built into their name.
Yes.
So you translate their name, you know what their function is.
Yes.
And I often thought, if you lost a third of the angels when they fell. Did the universe lose a third of its functionality, or did God replace these angels with new angels? What was going on that's not happening now because we don't have an angel doing the job?
And that is part of
look at this.
What's going on in this book. Too many wings. That's
link to Amazon right below, folks. Click it, buy it, get it shipped.
That's exactly part of what's going on here in terms of the questions you just asked and what happens with the ranks, because now you don't just have endless numbers of servants. Now you have beings that are questioning everything they believed. And that's another good segue to show you my comic, which is the Nephilim Wars. And the Nephilim Wars, so if you don't know what Nephilim are, long story short, angels saw human women and said, I got to get me one of these. And so they came down from heaven. No, literally, they came down from heaven, slept with human women, and they made the world's first mutants, because Nephilim are mutants. They're hybrids.
Giants.
They're part angel, part human. This is also where giants come from. This is where Goliath comes from, that David fights in the Bible. He's descended from the sons of Anak, and the sons of Anak, first tribe of Nephilim, human angel hybrids. 9 feet tall, super strong, and because superpowers are actually in the Bible. Teleportation is in the Bible.
Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him.
Super strength is in the Bible.
Absolutely.
Superpowers are in the Bible.
Yeah.
So this story is set in the future where they're coming back and they're kind of up to their old tricks, if you will, but there's a few new twists. So this comic will be available on all platforms probably in a couple more months. I crowdfunded this one, so I'm trying to make sure that all of my supporters get, everything I promised them. And so I want to do that first, and then I'm going to make it publicly available. But I am bringing some of these with me to conventions. So I'll be announcing a convention schedule real soon. So people that come see me in person are going to get some sneak peek treats for some of my comics before I put them up on all platforms. So I'm super proud of this one too, because this one's got its whole, and it's all linked back to the first book. By the time this series is over, you're going to be able to trace the links back to the very first book. It's all connected.
I love the interconnectedness of all this. What he's asking, so Nephilism is some sort of succubus counterpart. Succubi are demons. Succubi and incubi are both demons, male and female and male.
Right.
The Nephilim were crossbreeds.
Yeah. Crossbreed hybrid creatures that had elements of both.
And that there was an interpretation. This comes from the New Testament when somebody, people were always trying to catch Jesus on stuff in logic traps. And they're like, the woman gets married, her husband dies, she remarries, her husband dies, she remarries, her husband dies. Who's she married to in heaven? And the answer that he gave was like, well, we're like the angels in heaven. We're neither married nor are we given in marriage. And people have taken that to assume that there's a genderlessness to angels. But obviously, if they're creating Nephilim, they got equipment.
If they're making love to human women, right, that fascinated me too. And there are no female angels in the Bible.
I've noticed that.
Every angel that you see represented in the scriptures is represented as male. I'm fascinated by that too. So I come up for a reason for that in my books too. But that fascinated me as well. It's like, the first time we see the female form in the Bible is Eve.
Well, and technically, depending on which theology you want to follow, she's possibly the second female, because you've got that whole Kabbalah tale of Lilith.
That's right. That whole thing too. And that's
which I can't buy, because it's like, God made Lilith and Adam's like, yeah, go back to the drawing board on this one. Nah, it's not going to happen.
So yeah, but there's a full mythology around Lilith alone. Just there's a whole story world around, if such a thing, if she was real or if she existed or how she got that way. And it's really funny how can I put it? The femme fatale trope fascinates every culture.
Yeah.
There's something about a black widow, a femme fatale, a seductress. There's something about that.
Jezebel.
Yeah. There's something about that captures the imagination and the hearts and the attention, sometimes to your eternal regret. But there's just something about that trope that seems to be mesmerizing, and a lot of people theorize that's why the devil spoke to Eve. So I'm going to give my take on that as well, but I'm saying it's another one of those things where it's a rabbit hole of mythology and how you see world events unfolding. Because once I understood that the Nephilim were real and that they really had powers, and that Goliath was 9 feet tall and his spear weighed 30 pounds. And like you said, if they're making love to human women, that's not androgyny, that's not genderless. They obviously have male equipment because they have seed. And I'm like, now that changes everything. If angels have anatomy, genitalia, I'm like, oh. So yeah.
It creates more questions as it answers them, because it's like, okay, if they have seed and genitalia, but there are only men. Well, why did God create them to have the seed if there were no female angels for them to procreate with?
Right. That's right. That's right. And do they procreate sexually? We do.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they do. But then I said, well, then how are they made? And that's why I came up with the creation cocoon. So that's what I'm saying. These questions are they unfold without end. There's not an edge. Like you unfold some stuff and you're like, well,
Like a
great.
tesseract.
Glad we got that answered. Doesn't work that way. You unfold to a certain level and then you see all these other things that can open up as well.
So let me ask you this: your interconnected world and story here has a devil in it. A lot of stories about the devil. Has all these angels in it. Is God a character in your story? And if so, what's it like writing him?
God is a character in my story in a sense. You'll see when you read it, it is more represented as the throne. I told the story more from how the angels would see him, and that's significant. And you'll see it in the second novel, why that's so significant. Because as I thought about it, it is impossible to write any type of definitive or cohesive or outline tale of God. How do you write an infinite being? How does your human mind even begin to approach the subject? So I wrote it more as, from an angel's point of view, the throne is who we work for, the throne is who we obey.
Yeah.
But because the perennial question, because remember I told you, because I've talked to so many of my fans when I'm at a convention about this very thing, the perennial question that people want to know is, did God know Lucifer was going to turn? If God knew Lucifer was going to turn, right? Did he stop it? Did he make an effort? Why would there be a devil? Why would there be an allowance for there to be a devil? And all this different kind of stuff. And I do have answers that I give my take on it before the series is over. But as I imagined it, I said there is no possible way to depict God Almighty in terms of this kind of thing. So like I said, it's more told from the point of view of the good angels and the bad angels, if you will, Lucifer and Michael, if you will, and more the boss we work for than it is God being a character. Because what people always want to know is, why were these events allowed to unfold as they did if we're talking about sovereignty and omniscience? And so those are things that there's only so far a human mind can go.
It's a challenge writing with the human mind of characters that are celestially aware, because we're not celestially aware. One of the things that I thought was one of the ballsiest things I'd ever read written in Christian literature, and I wish I knew what the book title was. I want to say Frank Peretti wrote it, but it was one of these young adult series, and it was a brother and two sisters who, because of some accident, had come in contact with angels and were in semi-regular contact with them. So they knew this world existed. They knew that this was absolute truth. And the book is in an opening chapter where they're in their Sunday school class. They're not little kids; they're the teen kids. And one of the kids has a broken leg, and the Sunday school teachers, say, "Well, we prayed for Billy's broken leg here." And the kid who knows there's angels, like, "So why isn't he walking?" And he's like, "Well, that's not how God works. No, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says lay hands on him and they'll get up and walk. Either it's not working or we don't have enough faith. What is it?" Because he now knows everything's literal. And he's a real challenge to that teacher. Fortunately, that's not the story itself. They go on to some demon possession school shooting kind of thing, where they're dealing with that. But it struck me that, like, yeah, if you knew all of this stuff was real and stuff's not happening, and that you're told in the book happens if you do it the way it says, how do you deal with that? What's your reaction?
Yeah. Well, see, it's relationship. It's not religion. And the way things happen is things are progressive. Your faith is progressive. So the principle is, according to your faith, so it is unto you. You get what you believe. But faith is, okay, so I've got a water bottle here. So many times what people don't understand is that faith is a substance like water is a substance, but water is a physical substance. Faith is a spiritual substance. So imagine you need something done and you need 16 ounces of faith, but you only have 2. You will get a result that's on the level 2. That's where people get confused.
Yeah, but you only needed mustard seed to move a mountain. So it's
so
powerful stuff.
If I need 16 ounces to baste a turkey and I've only got 2, the turkey is only going to be basted with the water that I have.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. And so it's entirely possible to over or underestimate the amount of faith you actually have versus what you think you have. If you remember, there were some demons possessed people and in the New Testament, and they brought them to the disciples and they tried to cast them out. And
it wasn't disciples. It was people who had seen the disciples and they thought they could do it. If it's the same story I'm thinking of.
Right, yeah, but Peter was involved in there too. And they were like, why couldn't we cast them out? But you're right, it's some other people. And the Lord said, because of your unbelief, then he cast them out.
Okay, yeah, I know the story you're talking about. I was thinking of the one where these guys said, hey, we can do that. Let's go make some money. This guy's crazy.
No, that was the 7 sons of Sceva. That was in the name of this guy that Paul preaching, and they got their butts whipped by them demons, right?
Yes. Yes.
right.
Jesus, I know, and Paul, I know. Who the hell are you?
Who are you? That's right. That's in the book of Acts. But what I'm talking about is when they brought them to Peter and them, and they couldn't cast them out. And Peter and them went to the Lord and said, why couldn't we do it? And the Lord said, because of your unbelief. So once again, they underestimated how much faith they thought they had.
Yeah.
Versus what they really had.
They should certainly have had it because they had seen, bread feed 5,000 people and they'd witnessed everything. They should have known it was real. But
Peter said he was ready to die for the Lord. He was down. He was down for the cause.
Sure he was.
Go lead the Lord. I'm down. I'm with you. I'm with you to the end. And Jesus said, yeah, okay. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you're going to deny me 3 times. Peter's like, no, I would never do that. And they all said that. And sure enough, see, there's another example of where you thought you were versus where you really were.
Yeah. But when they finally saw that, hey, death's not the end, and that was a confirmed thing. Okay, all bets are off the table now. We got nothing to lose. We know what's going to happen.
I believe that for sure. I believe that after the resurrection, because of what the scripture teaches about how the Lord was there for 40 days, showing them over and over and over again. That would have to completely change everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been 2,000 years and people haven't stopped talking about it, right?
Right. Well, I mean, you see your best friend get slaughtered in public and then he comes back.
Yeah.
That might change your life.
and there's like this one little throwaway verse in the Bible that just nobody ever talks about. It's like, and there were other graves opened that day. I was like, there were other people walking around.
Yes. See, that's what I'm saying, man. See, I love details.
That's a verse someone should write a book about right there. Just
that one. That's right. Let me
first Walking Dead
as a somewhat tangent thread, but one of the characters who is my favorite character, tied with Batman, that people often don't realize has such strong Judeo-Christian roots because he also has the Greek and Roman roots, is Captain Marvel, Shazam.
Yeah.
Because Captain Marvel, with the original acronym, has the wisdom of Solomon. It was a real historical figure and the wisest king of Israel besides Christ himself. And his rogues gallery is based on so many of the things we've been talking about in terms of a Judeo-Christian and Roman ideology and philosophy. And so when you pull up Cap's rogues, you see so many of them are rooted in Christian and Hebrew imagery. And so that's another thing about Captain Marvel that
right off the bat, there's the 7 deadly sins.
Right, exactly. So that's why I'm always such a stickler for, I wish they would actually do the actual Captain Marvel instead of New 52 Shazam, who does away with almost everything that is a part of the rich mythology of Cap. That's why I'm so adamant about that, because I'm like, there are such great stories here.
Yeah.
And they just wiped them all away for big with superpowers, but that's another conversation.
Captain Marvel does a lot of stupid things because he's Billy in a big body, rather than a hero with the wisdom of Solomon.
Well, New 52 Shazam does dumb stuff. Captain
Yeah.
Marvel actually uses the old wisdom Kanagan.
Yes, he does. And you know, what was it? Sabak? What didn't Sabak
Yes.
have his acronym? Wasn't the S for Satan?
Was that part of his acronym? I think so.
Or Shaitan, at least.
Yes. Yes, he says his name, and then he's given all those powers. Yes. Satan,
Yeah,
Aim, Belial,
Satan, Aim,
Lucifer,
Belial. Yeah, they're all Satan, really.
Cratius. That's right. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. It seems to be less known these days that Captain Marvel has such strong Hebrew and Christian roots in his lore. And again, so like I said, he's my favorite character tied with Batman. So I've studied him extensively as well. And so there are just so many good stories there. I don't understand this idea of people talking about how, you know, hard to adapt for modern times. That makes no sense to me.
No.
That's
just
no.
That's because they're lazy writers. They
and
they're cynical writers.
See, I can't say no better than that. Lazy and cynical. You nailed it. I always thought that it should be obvious that Grant Gustin's Barry would meet Billy Batson at some point. So I actually wrote a whole episode where they met in my head. I had my head episode because I figured out a way it could be legit and honoring to the show. But someone said on Twitter the other day, and the more I thought about it, the more I agreed with them. They thought that it would have helped Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods if Captain Marvel had been a part of DC's outings on TV going all the way back to the beginning of the Arrowverse. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought how right that was, because they were saying that greater exposure for the character would have made more normies aware of the character, and that might have helped the numbers for Shazam 2. So I always thought he should show up on the Flash, but then I started thinking about the JSA, because he was in the JSA, John's Run, Stargirl, so many places with the DC content we have now, even with the Titans, where Captain Marvel could at least have made a guest appearance, and maybe that would have more firmly established him in the minds of normies.
You know, Jeff took a real risk, I thought, writing Captain Marvel in with the Justice Society and Stargirl, because you'll remember there was that arc, this whole subplot where Billy and Courtney
had a relationship.
Had a relationship.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you don't just forget that when you're on the job, but when they're on the job, he's Captain Marvel,
right.
and Jay Garrick notices the little things. And pulls him aside and says, "Hey, this is inappropriate. I don't know what you're doing here, but we you know, you need to really think about this." And he can't. And I'm thinking, just say the word and show him. But he's like, the wisdom of Solomon says I can't do this. I'm like, Solomon's an idiot. You're being pegged for something that you ain't.
Well, Cap's 30 and Billy's a teenager. Depending on which era you're looking at Billy, he goes anywhere from as young as 10 or 11 to maybe 16, 17. And Courtney is, I think, 16 in that story. So they're the same age in the story when Billy is powered down and is actually Billy.
Exactly.
But when Billy becomes Cap, he's an adult version of himself, so he's a grown man. And so it would be rather awkward. But rather than reveal himself to his teammates and let them kind of know, because that's the other thing. Billy has a completely inconspicuous way of changing. So I don't know how he maintained a secret identity anyway. But if you don't see the lightning, you would never put that grown man and that child together, which I thought was brilliant.
And of course, that whole story also hinges on which Captain Marvel continuity you want to choose to believe, whether it's like Billy becomes big and strong or Billy changes places with this adult hero who's a completely separate entity and personality.
Now, that's what Frank Miller said in The Dark Knight Strikes Again, but it doesn't make any sense for Billy to change places with Cap, because the reason Billy was chosen was because of his heart.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't retain that heart as an anchor to all the power, the wizard chose Billy because of Black Adam. I just said that on Twitter yesterday. I said, the reason Black Adam has always been a Marvel villain. And so this whole thing that's going down with The Rock and Zachary Levi, and, you know, Zachary Levi basically shading The Rock for not supporting the movie and all that. I'm like, I know the normies have to be confused. I'm like, the only reason the wizard chose a child with a good heart was because Black Adam turned bad so fast when he got the Shazam power, and the wizard Shazam thought about it for thousands of years. And then he said, I need to find a child of good and pure heart. So it doesn't make any sense when Billy transforms for him not to be Billy, because that's kind of the whole genesis and root of his character. So that's what I mean when I say, that's why I get so frustrated, because I'm like, this story here is the same way I feel about Lee and Kirby's Fantastic Four. I'm like, just read the first 12 issues of the comic. Just don't have a conversation. Read the first 12 issues of the comic, and you will see the depth that those men wrote. And you will see there are many different iterations of Captain Marvel, but you will see he's tied in with Egyptian lore, Roman lore, Hebrew lore, Greek lore, Christian lore. And I'm like, there's so much there to tell a powerful story. And I'm like, yo, just throw all that out and make big.
A well-educated writer could tell more than a story. They could run that series for a decade or more. I'm getting a subtle hint in the chat here for people to stay tuned for the Creative Cranium with Timothy Fling at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, which means that's in 13 minutes. But that's on this network, which we're simulcasting on, which means I've got to give up the stream link so that someone else can come in and start talking. I mean, our shows are usually an hour, but I should have just done it in my own channel, David, because we could go on for 2-3 hours talking about this stuff. I know. We got to get you back. So if you do the flash chat, please let me know if you get another comic book out there. I didn't know you crowdfunded this. I heard nothing about it. It wasn't making ripples in my circles, and I'm all over crowdfunding. So I've got to get better with that. I'm trying to get better. I truly am one of those creatives where I spend most of my time creating. So I need help with crowdfunding and marketing because most of the time, that's why, sometimes I'm tweeting at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because I've been working all day and I can't sleep. So yeah, but I have to get better at that. But I will definitely connect with you more, man, because we could talk about this stuff for days. And we could have a weekly show about it. Come on. This is a thing that there's theology and comics. I'll get my books out. I've got all kinds of books like Holiness in the Comics and philosophy and superheroes. It's just there's one by Richard Brewer. I want to say his name is. He's a preacher, and he uses comic books in his sermons. He brings up Daredevil to talk about discernment. He brings up Batman to talk about retribution. He just uses them, and they're like, okay, whatever works, go with it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's why. Besides, like most people don't know that Thawne and Zoom are the same person in the comics. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash in the comics, but he's 2 separate people on CW's Flash. So
because the comics made a Zoom character. They made a Hunter Solomon a
Zoom, which is more a Wally villain. But I'm saying originally one of Thawne Reverse Flash's nicknames was Professor Zoom. Yep. So he was kind of a Zoom before they made Hunter Zolomon. But besides the Reverse Flash, my favorite antagonist for Flash is Savitar, because Savitar took it religious. Savitar studied speed and made a religion out of it and sees himself that way as the rightful. He's kind of like Dr. Doom in that way. He sees himself as a rightful possessor of the Speed Force because he studied it and mastered it, and everybody else is an infidel and an unbeliever. And I love that angle.
Yeah. Whereas I'm like, Mark Waid, blast you. I hate the Speed Force and everything it represents.
I've heard people say that. I've heard people say they wish it had never been invented.
Well, because first of all, it made for, there's a Speed Force, there's a Slow Force, there's a Still Force. And of course, all those forces now exist on the Flash, and Barry and Iris are the father and mother of the avatars of all those things. And that's like, no. But second of all, if there's a Speed Force that you can draw on for speed, then that takes away everything that was special about the Flash. because it was like the lightning, the chemicals, the if you want to go all the way to the Secret Origin that came out after Crisis, the whole circuit of him becoming the lightning bolt that strikes the things and puts him in the loop, which I thought was a brilliant ending to the series. But so it happens again to Wally. Fine, no problem. It's a meta gene that's activated by this. But now anybody can tap into the Speed Force and make it, something that they can become a Flash. And we've seen it happen there. You're like, I'm filling my suit with Speed Force energy, or I'm psychically connected to the Speed Force. No, you're not. There's no such thing. You are a changed person who is different from the 6,999,999,999 other people on this planet with you, and you are the only one who can do this thing. That's why the book's named after you. Okay?
Right. Well, we went through the same thing with the Jedi and midichlorians, so we're very familiar how if they take magic.
I saw episode 1 and I was like, and Mary was overshadowed by the midichlorians and gave virgin birth to Anakin. I'm like, they've just taken the Christ mythos, and what if he went bad?
Well, yeah. So they take either magic or faith-based things and they make them science, or they take science-based things and they make them faith or magic. Like that time that Peter Parker was chosen by a magic totem spider, and he shed his own skin and he rebirthed himself. And so,
yes,
yeah,
What was that? I was like, no, don't do this to us. We don't mess with, don't keep adding on to the, the secret origin of Spider-Man. But did you know that at the same time, this was going on and contributing to it? And behind this door, so if these 75 million things weren't happening all at the same time, he wouldn't have been Spider-Man.
So, sometimes things get to a point where they're absolutely absurd, because it's not that there aren't any more stories to be told, but it's like when you start unraveling the foundations of what was going on, that works up to a point, and then you've hit a point of the diminishing return so hard until you need to leave that alone and do something else. I liked it when the murder of the Waynes was a random mugger, a random thug, because it taught Bruce that there's unfairness in life, there's evil in life, and it doesn't have to make any sense. It just happens. It can happen to you even as a child of privilege. That's brilliant enough for me. But then it's a mob plot, and then they were targeting the Waynes, and then
it's the Court of Owls.
Right, Court of Owls. I like Court of Owls.
And then Thomas and Martha deserved it, because
that's what I didn't like. I didn't mind Court of Owls. I like the idea that the natural enemy of the bat has a human manifestation through the owl. I didn't mind that. But when you start corrupting the Waynes, I'm like, that's not.
I think they finally went back and said, no, this was a lie. To that was that whole Grant Morrison Batman R.I.P. thing with ancient Thomas Wayne, who's lived for hundreds of years and became Dr. Hurt. And if you can read the Grant Morrison Rest in Peace arc and come out with it with a linear story in your head, it's like, oh, I know what happened. You're lying. You are lying. You have no idea what happened in that book, just like the rest of us don't.
Leave immortality to Vandal Savage and leave the Lazarus Pit to Ra's al Ghul, and we'll all be fine.
Yeah. Quit. And I know there's a Lazarus Pit. Somebody dies. Robin dies. Yes, you should take him to a Lazarus Pit. They exist. You'll use them. You didn't use them for Barbara Gordon, damn it. But you'll.
Oh, don't get me started on what they've done to Batgirl. I don't even understand. See, there's some characters that seem to be a focal point for the ire of so many writers, until I'm like, because they did it to Wally West and they did it to Barbara, and I'm like, why do you hate these people so? I don't understand why you hate these characters, because
the redheads
been dumped on them.
The redheads, that's why they don't like redheads.
Oh Lord, not the ginger side.
Not ginger side. Oh, David, I've got to kill the chat. I've got to. Pops is going to kick me out right here, as he's the producer on this channel. So he's like, we got 5 minutes, guys. Get out of here. So you can say it, Pops. Go ahead.
I'm not kicking you out. I'm just letting you know we're about to start the other show, and you might get cut off my channels.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give it a graceful ending right here, David. Thank you so much for coming on. Man, I love talking
Mr. Taylor.
Hey,
this
how
is
are
Pops
you?
Van Zandt. Pops Van Zandt has got a network of podcasts, and he's promoting creators all the time. When you get another comic book going or another book going, hit me up to hit him up, and we can get you on. Like right now, you're broadcasting on 6 different channels with me.
Awesome. I will do that. Thank you so much, RJ. I appreciate it, man. Love being here with you, man. Love it.
Everybody in the chat, guys, thank you so much for participating and hanging on to David's every word here tonight. We don't have a show without you. We're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. And of course, as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night.